And to kind of close the loop, what are your views on Any and its evolution from Boost to the standard?
Okay, the Any question. Yeah, so Any has a long history, a pre-standard history, a pre-Boost history, and I came across the term Any in there's a lot of kind of type theory papers and things in the 70s and 80s, and then ASN1, abstract syntax notation for specifying what should be transferred in the protocol. They all have a type called Any, and it's this kind of universal type that's not necessarily a root type. And I was working on a system where we needed to have such a thing, and I worked out you could do this generically. The problem is we couldn't actually use the templates that we wanted to at the time, but I worked out in that case, okay, how do I dumb it down to the types that we are likely to use, the basic vocabulary types that we're likely to use. But the whole idea of having a universal type, if you like, a type-safe void pointer, but that's value-based, was one of those things I was very interested in. In fact, that old project I discovered afterwards, they started joking about the whole thing after I left as Kevlin Henny. It became known in the code base from that point of view. But when Boost started up, it was one of those things that I've contributed 3 things to Boost, 2 of which are about weakening the type system, 1 of which is about strengthening it: numeric cast, lexical cast, and Any. And Any made it into the standard, and that was, it had undergone. I introduced it originally in a C++ report article, over 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Then I submitted it to Boost, adding a little more complexity, so on. But then I passed off the ownership of that to others, and it's evolved there. But it's actually kept its simplicity. It was always intended to be. It's got to be a simple type. It can take absolutely anything. It's not a kind of constrained union type like variant, so therefore you don't know its content. You can just pass it around, or you can ask what it is and get values out of it, but you can't do anything that is any more sophisticated than that. It was never intended to be any more sophisticated than that. So I'm actually surprised that over time it has become, it stayed as consistent as it was. Now, it was standardized. It was included in C++ 17. The late Beeman Dawes was primarily responsible for taking the original text and tightening it up, and I just gave review comments and so on. Beeman did a really great job there. But how do I feel about it? I wish it had been different, because by the time you got to C++ 17, this type was nearly 20 years old, and C++ had gone through a number of standards. So with hindsight, I wish it had been more consistent in its appearance. In other words, we could have changed certain things, names and syntactic conventions and usage conventions. I think that optional, variant, and Any should have a lot more consistency. And that's unfortunately because C++ doesn't have a kind of binding vision. They were standardized as they were because they came they had a source, Boost in the case of variant and Any, and they were left very much as they were. So they were still compatible with those old versions. I actually think they should have been changed in a way that was not compatible. That's the whole point of namespaces, so that they were more consistent with each other, and they had reflected the standardization trends and idioms that have been acquired in that time. So I still retain I love the basic idea. I would stick with that. But I kind of like the way that variant and optional do things a little bit more these days, and I kind of wish Any looked a bit more like that.
And I think there's one more question, and then we're going to close